All right. Good morning and welcome to General Finance for October 21st. Identification of media. I don't see any. Any changes or deletions for the agenda? If not, can I have a mover? Moved by Audrey, second by Dale. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Seen none, carried. Delegations, Grand River Post-Secondary Education Office. Michelle Belmberry and Dr. Susan Hill and Director Justine Henhock. I see Michelle. Oh, there's Dr. Susan Hill. Good morning. Oh, and there's
Good
Justine.
morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We're
Good
all
morning.
over to Sue.
Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Scano Swagwego. Um, so we're bringing forward a request for financial support and advocacy. And I hope that everyone had a chance to read the briefing note that that we generated for background to the request. In essence, I apologize. I'm at work in Toronto, and so I'm hearing a siren right now. I hope you guys aren't getting too much of that. But what we're bringing forward is an ask seeking support from elected council to supplement the living allowance that we're able to provide to students through our PSSSP allocation. As you may or may not know, the amount of money that we received this year is actually quite significantly less than what we had been receiving over the last 5 years. In 2019, ISC announced that they were looking at creating a new funding model for supporting PSSSP, and they actually had an influx of cash at that time. Of course, shortly after that, we experienced the COVID pandemic, and then there were additional funds that were allocated to communities to support post secondary students through the pandemic experience. And so our budget changed a lot during that time. Um, and we were certainly able to allocate additional funds to help our students at that time. But this year was when the new formula was supposed to come into play. And what we experienced was actually quite a dramatic decrease in funds, much more aligned with what we had been receiving around 2018 and prior, which, given the massive increase in cost of living as well as increases in tuition costs, it resulted in what is a significant decrease in what we're actually able to help students with through this allocation. So what we're putting forward in a nutshell is we looked at the OSAP allocation that is calculated under their funding mechanism for a single student, which is $2,080 per month as living allowance. That's what they see as the base for what a single student should receive in order to be able to support themselves while attending post secondary full time. Under the current funding we have available to us, we're only able to give students $1,000 a month towards living allowance. And so we're looking for help from elected council to meet the gap that exists between what OSAP says is a decent base for students, a reasonable base for students, versus what we're able to provide for them. So we're looking for a top up allocation of $1,080 per month for our students. And we've given you a few different formulas of what that can look like in terms of if we were to do the full 8 months that most of our students are in post secondary versus the remaining 6 months of the current year, or looking at the winter semester, which would be 4 months. And so that's sort of the rationale between the different models that you see in the briefing note. I don't know, Justine, if you wanted to add to that. I know Michelle is at McMaster with her child right now and had to step away, I think, because they're up next for x-rays.
Actually, no, I don't have anything else to add. Susan, you did a good job in covering the specifics.
The other piece, though, of course, that we're also asking for, and that's in the note as well, is we're looking, and we know that elected council has always advocated on behalf of our post-secondary students, but we're really seeking sort of that formal recognition of a commitment to advocacy for our students in thinking about the long-term funding allocated to our community through PSSSP. We have all kinds of documentation that demonstrates that it's insufficient to cover the needs of our community, and we're happy to supply information to council members when you're doing your various campaigning with and your meetings with various members of government. And we're just looking for sort of a reinvigoration of that relationship that's been in place for over 30 years now, right, in terms of advocacy. So that's the other ask that we're making in this regard.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions or comments? Audrey?
Good morning, ladies. Anyway, I'm just checking to see, I thought I read at one point that it was this was yearly. Is this just for just this one point in time?
So what we're asking for right now, Audrey, is for this current year. We understand that it's difficult for elected council to make long-term commitments, and that's why we're really stressing that we want to seek your support in terms of hard advocacy for ultimately what we would like to see as a permanent increase in the PSSSP allocation that comes to our community. And we know that elected council is best positioned to do that advocacy with the federal government.
Follow up, Audrey?
Yeah, that's what council's here for, is to help all of our students and our community members out. But should the federal government not come up with the money, then what is your plan B?
Plan B would be to try to work with elected council to see what resources may be available in the community to help meet that gap. And we know that you have many, many asks from our community. You've also recently put forward some major commitments. So we understand that you have a big picture that you're working with, but we would definitely seek to work with elected council as a means of trying to meet those gaps in the future. But we're not asking right now for elected council to commit to any financial number beyond the current ask for the current year.
Uh, Third follow up.
Sorry. So what you're asking for today definitively then is political advocacy.
Political advocacy and money for the current school year.
Okay, anything else? Elena?
Hi. Thanks, Susan. I'm wondering in chambers for TIA, is there a breakdown of what you're asking for in a slide so the community can see? I know we haven't discussed numbers, actual numbers. And my other question is post-secondary doesn't require family financial information like OSAP would, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is the classification for students applying? I know that there's different levels. Can you
So we
break it down for me?
are you speaking to the priority levels perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, so on the gripsio.org website, you can access our priority lists. We have priorities 1 through 7, although number 6 doesn't exist anymore. So it's a little bit disjointed, but we didn't renumber them because we didn't want to confuse the community with that sort of major shift. So we just eliminated the priority 6 grouping. And then within those priorities, so probably the most relevant information is priority 1 are continuing successful students. So students who are in a program of study that's been approved and that they qualify to continue in. So in other words, they're in good academic standing, and they've also complied with all of the document requirements that GRIPSIO has to have in order to make sure that we're compliant with our reporting to ISC. So students who fit those criteria, ongoing successful students, are priority ones. Priority twos are new high school graduates. And we also have a mechanism in there for students who wish to take a year off between high school and college or university, where they're able to retain their priority level. They have to indicate it to the office in order to retain that. So that's the priority ones and twos. Also within that, and many of you may have heard that we also have two residency categories. Residency one are students who live within 100 kilometers of the GRIPSIO office. We use the GRIPSIO office as sort of the base marker, because we know 100 kilometers from Bateman is different than 100 kilometers from Oneida Road, for example, right? So we use the GRIPSIO office as the geographic marker for that. And then priority two are students who live outside of that 100-kilometer marker. And that was put in place a number of years ago in order to really try to make sure that students who grow up in the community and adjacent to the community, recognizing our housing situation, that we were really prioritizing those students who have a strong connection to our contemporary community, while also not sort of casting aside those of our relatives and family members who live outside of that 100 kilometers. So it was brought in as a mechanism to try to bring some balance in that regard, because we were definitely seeing a trend where students who were living further away from the community were being funded at a higher rate than students from within the community. And so we brought in that residency criteria as a means of trying to bring some balance to that.
Thank you for breaking that down for me.
Sure.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments on Cynthia?
Yeah, looking at the briefing note and the little chart in there, it has the November to April being 11 months, 559 students, and the same for the September to April, 559 with the top up. And then under another option, it's funding from January to April for 129 students. Could you just explain the difference in the number of, it's because they both say approved full-time?
So the 129, Cynthia, that starts January is referring to the new winter applicants. So we have an application round for students who are either starting programs in January who may have missed deadlines for the fall intake. So we have an additional 129 students who qualify for funding and who've been approved for funding for January. So that's sort of that breakdown difference there.
Follow up, Cynthia?
Yeah, thanks for that. So under in your briefing note at the bottom, I assume that's your recommendation. It's GREPSIO seeking funding request of 4,179,600. So that would be a combination of the November to April option one, along with the new intake from January to April. So that would equal the 4,179,600. Is that's the mix?
Yes, that's correct. So we just broke it down for folks so you understand why we're like what we're asking for. Hopefully it makes sense, but that was the rationale. So people knew what specifically was going to happen within those different groups.
Follow up again? Yep.
Not a follow up so much as a question for Jennifer in our finances. And if council was able to fund this for the one time for now, subject to political advocacy, where might we source those funds? And I'm particularly interested in OFNLP and if that meets the criteria.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, that would be the source that I would look to is the OFNLP. And I believe that it would under the community criteria. However, I would have to look at it a little further to ensure that that was correct.
Sorry, if it meets the criteria, do we have sufficient funds there? I know we've allocated quite a few chunks out of the monies.
I believe so, yes, that we would. Again, I would have to take a look at the commitments that we've made and ensure that this would fall within that. But I believe at this time that it would.
Linda?
Yes, just I guess some food for thought for council. In my days at Polytech, I am aware that some of the students would apply for OSAP for the grant funding only. So my question to Gripsio, if you're looking at a top up of 1080 per student, do you know how many students are taking advantage of the OSAP grants? Because there are money there. You don't have to just go in debt. Thanks.
Justine, do we have a sense of how many of our students might be accessing OSAP, particularly for the grant section? I know that they're
No.
encouraged to do that, but I
Right.
don't have a sense of how many do.
No, we don't like specifically track that data for students because some students don't like to disclose that information to us. So no, I don't have that data.
Greg?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Susan. I just had a general question on, at the end of the year, do you have a surplus at all? Does it, at times, because we do have students that sometimes don't continue on with the programs they are enlisted or they're seeking. Is there any time at the year, is there a reassessment of the funds?
Yes, so generally, Justine and her team sort of get a sense of what the surplus funds may look like in late February, early March, I believe. And Justine, correct me if I'm misquoting on dates. But then when there is the surplus, and as you said, there's often students who disenroll. So there often are some funds that are left. For those students who are in compliance with all of their documents and who continue to be in good academic standing, there's usually a I forget the term that's used, Justine, but like basically like a bursary that goes to students.
And
In the,
incentive.
yes,
Sorry,
the
Susan.
incentive. And
Yeah.
that's usually in April, right, Justine?
Right. We usually issue that in late March when we do have funds left to students. Yes.
And just generally speaking, do you have a basic, like a percentage? Would that be like a 10% de-enrollment, as you say, or would it be, would you have a figure on that?
Not at the moment, but I can get that figure to you. The percentage.
Hazel?
Yes, what Linda had presented with regard to OSAP. I know a lot of students who were not eligible or for whatever reason and couldn't get post-secondary funding had to apply to OSAP and get all of their funding. And I know some of the people that are now graduated working and are still paying back OSIP or OSAP funds. Um, it just makes me wonder, the people that are in school right now are not getting exactly what the government gives to everyone else. And I think it becomes a political matter whereby this council should be talking to the government about their just sending a certain portion here, but off reserve they're getting more. And that doesn't make fair sense to anybody. So I don't know. I think we need to have discussion on this topic. Thank you.
Audrey?
I'd like to know if it's possible that Justine and Susan, if we can put this into two motions. One for the political advocacy, which I'm prepared to move on, And the second one would be sorted out after we have council and chief have a chance to discuss with finance how this can work. So it's up to you.
I think we're fine with that splitting suggestion, Audrey. And it does make sense because it's really two separate items, right? So I think we would be fine with that.
Follow up, Audrey?
Yeah, I'll move that council provide advocacy for this worthwhile project to help our students out with more funding.
So with that, do they report to your committee to be able to bring it forward in the political part?
I thought it's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, they want political. So can they meet with your committee to write and have the documents that they're talking about, and
Yes, they
then go
can.
from there?
Yes.
Okay. So Audrey has a motion for political advocacy for the Grand River Post-Secondary Education Office. Is there a seconder? Second by Amos. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none, carried. Waive second reading. Moved by Audrey, second by Amos. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none, carried. Okay, go ahead, Dale.
Morning, ladies. How you doing? I don't know if this question's for Justine. I was wondering if you had any discussions with ISC in regards to long-term funding or any discussions on the funding as it is now. And if you did, what was the outcome?
I haven't recently had any discussions with ISC. The only discussions I had with ISC recently was to try to get information from them about the current budget and if there's any increases coming, because as Susan was saying, they're supposed to be rolling out this new budget, and that's the difficult part, is trying to reach members in ISC. So this political advocacy will definitely help in that regard. So to answer your question, Dale, it's been a challenge just to even reach ISC, and your assistance would be grateful and helpful in all that regard. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
So let's go to they're looking for funding. So go ahead, Jennifer. In the sense of the next steps, they have option 1, 2, and then they have another option for just January to April. So can you give, do we need to look more into it, or council's decision?
Yes, I think it'd be a good idea for me to take a look at the OFNLP criteria and make sure that it matches. And then map their asks against what we've already committed to OFNLP and give council a full picture of what they would be committing to before they proceed.
Okay. So go ahead, Amos.
Can we have that assessment by the next finance meeting? Will your office do that?
Yes.
We can make a decision then.
Yep, that's what I was just gonna make sure that.
So my follow-up question is, we're looking at possibly funding the 3 options, when you're gonna come back with some numbers for us, for each, right? Or where it could come from for the 3 options, A, B, C?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
So November 4th, we'll have it on the agenda. Is that okay, Dr. Susan Hill, Justine, and Michelle? So we'll have it back on the agenda for November 4th.
Okay, and will you let us know if you need us to be present? We'll make ourselves available.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, have a great day. Thank you
You
for
too,
joining
Bella.
us.
Yep, bye.
Let's go to number 5, adoption of general finance meetings for October 7th. Is there a mover? Moved by Audrey, seconder. Do I have a seconder? second by Dale. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none carried. Let's go to number 6. Six Nations Policing Service Agreement, amendment for number 1. That the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council approves that Chief Sherry Lynn Hill sign the Six Nations Policing 5-year service agreement with the Ministry of Solicitor General, amendment number 1, in the amount of $1,032,381.99. Is there a mover? Moved by Dale. Is there a seconder? Second by Greg. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, it's an amendment number 1 for the 1,032,831. Is that in it? That would have to be in addition to their current funding. What is their total budget?
Go ahead, Dale.
I'm just going by memory here, but I think they're in probably around $6-7 million total budget, operation wise.
Okay, all in favor? Anybody opposed? See none carried. Recommendation 6.2 to waive second reading. Moved by Dale, second by Greg. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none carried. Number 7, Six Nations Police Services Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement. That the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council approve Chief Sherry Lynn Hill to sign the Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement with the Ministry of Solicitor General for funding in the amount of $1,436,233 to provide 3-year funding for missing and murdered Indigenous women and Girls Fund for First Nations Policing from April 1st, 2024 to March 31, 2027. Funding over the following fiscal years are as follows. Year 1, 20 to 24 to 2025, $465,817. In year 2, from 2025 to 2026, $478,627. Year 3, from 2026 to 2027, $491,789. Is there a mover? Moved by Dale, second by Audrey. Question, Cynthia.
Yeah, I guess Dale, I'll put you on a spot again. I think you and Melba are the are the reps on there. Do you know? Because it's for murdered and missing women for 5, 6, or 3 years. Do they use that to hire additional staff to kind of focus in that area, or?
And if it's available and outlined in the funding agreement, yes, but I don't know the specifics offhand. But if it's available for additional staff, then yeah, they will pursue additional staff to meet these objectives within the funding arrangement. But
Audrey?
I can find that out for you, Cynthia, if you like, specifically.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there are more, I guess, letters to this acronym. What about the two-spirited people?
I'm not sure. It just says.
Does that go to you, Dale?
Yeah, I can find out specific in relation to the areas that they would cover, but I wouldn't be able to answer that today, but I can get that for you.
Okay, moved by Dale, second by Audrey. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none carried. Recommendation 7.2 to waive second reading. Moved by Dale, second by Audrey. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none carried. Let's go to number 8. Is Comprehension Funding Agreement, Amendment number 134, 137, and 139. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. So recommendation 8.1 is whereas Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council has entered into a 5-year comprehensive funding agreement with Indigenous Services Canada. And whereas comprehensive funding agreement amendment numbers 134, 137, and 139 have been received for council approval and signatures, therefore be it resolved that Six Nations of the Grand River elected council approve and sign the following comprehensive funding agreement amendments numbers 134, 137, and 139 for fiscal year 2024-2025 between His Majesty the King and Right of Canada, as represented by the Minister of Indigenous Services and the Six Nations of the Grand River. Amendment includes additional funding for the following departments, programs, or projects: self-governing negotiation supply funding for lands and resources for $14,529. Waste operation and maintenance for the Public Works Department, $18,250. And Jordan Principal Child and Youth Health under the Department of Wellbeing for $6,637,800, or sorry, $6,637,865.
Okay, is there a mover? Moved by Audrey. Is there a seconder? Second by Hazel. Comments and questions. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, that's Jordan's principal, $6,637,865. And I don't know if someone who sits on health here, Hazel, Greg, Audrey. With that Jordan's principal, can you sort of explain how it works? Well, not sort of. Can you explain how it works? That is, I hear people, it takes forever to get a response, 12 to 18 months. So I'm thinking because we also get this funding, enriched funding, we have an amendment through our comprehensive funding arrangements, what they call enriched, or whatever, that's the term they use. But so is it this big weight? What sort of items would people be applying for different than the funds we get? Do you know? Because I didn't know that we got this money. I thought it was all, because I know they have a huge backlog Indian Affairs, because the health portion's now under them.
Go ahead, Audrey, and then Jennifer.
Just to let you know that we've invited Travis Anderson from the federal schools to come and explain the Jordan's principle, and as well as we can invite our manager of Jordan's principle to come at the same time to make sure that everyone understands what's going on and to be able to ask questions. Because they're trying to streamline it right now. There's a lot of hiccups in it, and they're trying to sort it out. As well as I believe that Jordan's principle is changing some of their criteria and ruling out some of the things that they're paying for now. So if that'll be happening probably within the next month.
Jennifer.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I provided some clarification on what's included in an amendment. If we have applied for support and it's taken that 12 to 18 months for ISCR to respond, and then they have finally agreed to it and are going to fund us the money, it would be included as an amendment as well. So the $6 million isn't necessarily just in addition to it. It would be inclusive of those things that have been applied for, included in that.
Cynthia.
Oh, sorry. So when individuals apply to Jordan's principle for whatever reason, they get approved. Then if we get a paper approval, do we flow them the money? Then ISC reimburses us. Is that what's going on? I'm still not sure what.
I think there's a combination of different things that happen when it comes to Jordan's principle. But for reimbursement for us to pay back the supports that we have provided, such as paying the Jordan principal workers and things like that, that would come directly to us for us to flow out. Those types of things would be included in the amendment.
We recently had a group here for the Little NHL, and they wanted a letter of support from council. So that, and you said, or someone said, for that type of application, for whatever reason, there's a speedy reply versus the other types, whatever they are. The group, I think it was a group application. There's a speedier reply. So would that be like these funds we're getting here, would it come like to us like that, or?
I believe so, yes, because I believe that the way that that group was asking for the funds was for it to come through us and us to provide that support. So in that instance, we would get an agreement letter, an amendment letter that says, in addition, these funds are coming for these purpose. But when it gets flowed to us, it would be included on a CFA amendment. If I remember correctly, for how we were setting that up. So there's a combination of different things that how it occurs with Jordan's principle. It might be worthy for the well-being committee to have a presentation from the well-being department to understand the different nuances for how the funding gets to us from Jordan's principle.
Follow up? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, it just got me thinking. I keyed in on those words, a group application, and it's a speedier process than whatever the other is. Could we not, on behalf of whomever, we must have historic data last year, etc., what types of things people apply for, what the needs are? Just for example, I know they have I don't even know what the term is, those helpers for with children with special needs. They're the helper to go into the schools. Would we not have that historic data about how many of those are required every year? And could we put in this group application? And I'm just using that as an example because there would be a whole host of things. I'm wondering why we don't, or should we, or could we explore that route since it's a speedier process?
We could definitely take a look at it. I know that to administer those types of applications and things would have a considerable amount of work on our aspect that we would need to take care of which, as you're aware, we don't get the funding that goes to Jordan's principal. The people at ISC are being paid to distribute it in the way that they're being paid to distribute it. When it gets flowed over to us, we don't necessarily get the additional funds to hire the people to be able to do the things. I think it's a worthy discussion to see what would be required. And for your question for the data, I believe those are things that a Jordan's principal department would track themselves to some extent, but also that the performance and planning an evaluation team that's under Zach, that they would be looking at capturing some of that information as well to be able to give more comprehensive data behind something that might be needed for political advocacy to show, well, we want to do it in this manner because it's faster, but to be able to administer it, we would need this level of staffing, and this is what we would need on top of that from there.
Follow up, Cynthia?
Audrey, you said Travis Anderson is coming, so hopefully he's well versed in all these things. Give him the heads up, so if he isn't, he can bring someone from the Jordan's principal sector with him. But as I understand it, we get I don't know, is it 10% admin fee? So when one gets additional funds, for example, if we were to go after successfully this group application, I would have to think we would get that fee with that as well to help you with the stuff.
We get a 10% admin fee on certain things, but not necessarily on everything. For that group application, they were advocating in that for a 10% admin fee because it was coming to Six Nations to distribute, and they recognized that there would be additional work that's needed to be done, and we need to be able to cover that. However, not all funding that comes through has a 10% admin fee attached to it.
Okay, and I also asked the ladies here to make sure when Travis does come in that the manager from Jordan's principal to make sure that they're here. Yep. Go ahead, Amos.
Yeah, I've been I'm the chair of well-being, and I still can't get my mind around Jordan's principle. I'm going to ask that we have a workshop at well-being, first of all, so that we can understand all the criteria and the funding available. I don't know if there's an annual report. I'd never seen anything since I came. Was there an annual report from Jordan's principal on March 31st? Those kinds of questions I don't really know, so I'm really looking, I'm confused as everybody else is. and I'm the chair of well-being, so I'm going to put that, and I'm going to make sure that it's on the agenda every meeting. That manager is with us at well-being to give even any updates for us for Jordan's principle.
Good. Linda?
Yeah, and again, I just wanted to share because I do have a lot of experience with Jordan's principle and in particular group applications. I will say, Cynthia, group applications can take a very, very, very long time as well. Um, regarding the EAs that you were speaking to, and it's about the individuals. So Jordan's principle is really looks at substantive equality. So if a student needs assistance, academic assistance, they need to be evaluated in terms of what are their needs so that, the appropriate levels are there. So it'd be very difficult to just say, well, we need X number of EAs because it really depends on the academic level and the just the requirements of each student. But I just wanted to share that group applications can take forever. I've seen it. Oftentimes, they are not approved until the following fiscal. So it's always a catch-up. I see Jennifer's nodding. But that's my experience with Jordan's principle. It is never meant to be a long-term permanent solution. It's always meant to be a stopgap for, longer term. But and I do know that they have been looking at reform of Jordan's principle probably a year and a half now. So they are looking to make significant changes, and that's my experience with it. So it's very needs based for the individuals, and the only advantage to, I guess, group applications is really is if you have like 100 kids at a time that are being serviced, it's easier for everyone to do the approvals, from a group application standpoint, but it still does look at every single status child or individual, and the proof has to be there that they are status. So it doesn't take away any of the level of detail, but one application for 100 kids is faster than 100 individual applications, in terms of getting them in and reporting on it. To your point, Amos, we had to do regular service delivery reports on the 30th of June for the prior fiscal. So just wanted to share things.
Greg, Cynthia, then Audrey. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, just to Linda's point, yeah, there is a Jordan Principle reform negotiations that were going on. It was separated from the initial long-term funding agreement that was just recently been turned down from the AFN through the vote. And a lot of the concerns were to separate it from Jordan's Principle, separate from the long-term agreement, was due to the fact of all of these delays, both on the side of ISC, funding service providers being paid, the emergency situation being extended to beyond 1 month, where immediate needs were not addressed in a timely fashion. This is still under negotiation. I think we'll have to see how the Jordan's Principle is addressed by the AFN. As you know, Koo and Nan were interveners in this case, and there was a lot of discussions recently about the, I guess, the voting down of the long-term agreement and how that affects Jordan's Principle going forward, because now those have to be renegotiated.
Cynthia?
Well, my question was going to be similar to what Greg has just brought up. That is, it wasn't this spring prior, I believe there was agreement in principle, and those two matters were joined at that point, but they went into, as Greg said, two separate tables, and I don't know the timeline, and I didn't. That got voted down. So do we have an update on that? Like how long? Now what then?
That's the next thing is we're waiting for is going to be what's the next move and stuff. At the next Chiefs of Ontario in Thunder Bay. Audrey?
Yeah, just for some clarification, the TAs are federal government employees hired by the federal government to work in the schools, anywhere from 2 to small groups. They no longer service one-to-one, which was formerly called tutor escorts. They also referred to as education assistants. So the people are, Jordan's principal workers are being hired. They are not federal government employees. So they're hired for a term, whatever that child needs. And once needs have been met, then they're no longer working there. So we'll have that all explained to everybody so that everybody has the same understanding. Now,
Okay, moved by Audrey, second by Hazel. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none, carried. Recommendation 8.2 to waive second reading. Moved by Audrey. Is it seconder? Hazel. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none, carried. Can I have, goes to number 9, a motion to adjourn to go to in camera. Moved by Dale. Second by Amos. All in favor? Anybody opposed? See none, carried. Thank you for joining us today, everyone, and have a great day.